Welcome to another episode of HS Athlete, where we dive deep into the stories and strategies of athletes who push the limits of age and performance. This has been the warmest weekend in San Francisco, and it was beautiful and warm and sunny, and maybe also a stark reminder that it gets hotter and hotter everywhere in the summertime each year. But anyways, we were lucky to cool off with the cold waters of the Pacific right here in our backyard. But about today's episode. This week, I am thrilled to bring you a conversation with a true legend in the world of mountain biking. We traveled to Gunnison, Colorado to meet David Weitz, known for winning the iconic Leadville 100 mountain bike race 6 times, including victories over Tour de France riders like Lance Armstrong and Fred Landis. David continues to inspire riders across all generations. In this episode, we will not only explore his towering career and the magic of the outdoors, but also dive into critical issues like doping in the sport, lessons of staying motivated to train, how mindset is so important, and also how flexibility in diet can fuel both everyday life and basic performance. David brings a wealth of wisdom from decades of competing and managing the physical and mental rigors of elite performance. Whether you are a mountain biker or not, his insights into perseverance, mindset, and how the outdoors can be a space for personal growth and transformation offer something valuable for all of us. David also takes us behind the scene of the trail building and advocacy work that he has been driving for decades. I learned a few things about how taking an inclusive approach and accounting for the needs of other trail users, hikers, runners, equestrian groups, etc., has been a huge part of the growth and maintenance of trail systems across the US. There are lessons here for all outdoor sport communities here. We recorded this episode a month or so ago. David was about to head off for a huge mountain biking race over the weekend, as he also intended to celebrate his 60th birthday on the trail. Stay till the end to hear of some major life hurdles that David has had to overcome to be able to continue into the sport he loves, and why, again, his attitude and mindset has been the secret to his enduring success.
I am in Gunnison, Colorado, and this morning for breakfast I had a bowl of cereal, a banana, and a peach, and some juice.
Sure, sounds healthy, sounds tasty with some summer fruit. And David, you are in Gunnison, which I know Gunnison is famous for outdoor recreation, but I also heard that it may be the coldest city in the lower 48. I see the sun behind you,
Yeah.
but is that reputation correct?
It is. It's one of the colder places in the lower 48, along with International Falls, Minnesota. And the way they usually do that is they just take the average low temperature throughout the year, and we get into the 40s typically at night. In fact, now we're dipping into the 30s, but even in the summertime, it might be mid 40s, which is unusual for a lot of parts of the country. But we certainly can get into some very cold temperatures, minus 20, minus 30, even minus 40 occasionally in the wintertime. It feels like that warm air pushes through our valley, and it heads up the Continental Divide, and it doesn't quite make it over to go east, and it just slips right back down and settles into Gunnison. There's a few other valleys in the high country that are cold like us, but yeah, we definitely have a cold climate, but it's what we call a dry cold, and usually the sun is out. When it's stormy here, it's not that cold. So if it's cloudy, it's probably warm in the wintertime. If it's high pressure and full sun and bluebird, that's when it can be really cold.
Well, I have spent some time in Colorado in the summertime, but have not been there in the winter. I'm curious though, does that kind of climate actually contribute to the high quality of the outdoor recreation? For example, like you also partake in winter sports, and I think you have been doing that for a long time. Does it actually contribute to, let's say, really high quality snow and powder in the winter, as well as somehow also help create beautiful trails, beautiful opportunities for recreation in the other months?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got, Colorado, Utah. The Intermountain West has really light, fluffy powder. So our snow conditions for skiing and snowboarding are excellent if we have a good snow year. And then again, if we have a good snow year, that runoff goes into our rivers and creates around Crested Butte, which is just 28 miles north of me in Gunnison, amazing wildflowers. Um, it
Ah,
can, certainly, when as we've seen in the West often, if it's really dry, forest fires can happen, and that's not good for outdoor recreation. From a perspective of you might lose an area, and also just the smoke from adjacent fires, and sometimes even hundreds of miles away are impacted by the smoke from forest fires. So the winter conditions can certainly help summer, but there's it's a bit of a stretch. But when in the mountains, when we have a great winter, and we have for the last couple, a lot of snow, the skiing gets really good. The coverage, we talk about the coverage on the mountain because there's lots
mm,
of rocks on the mountain, and in a low snow year, you might have a lot more rocks sticking up. Or at Crested Butte, we have steeper terrain that they may not get to open because there's just not enough snow. So we're always, very happy when there's a lot of snow. But primarily, the Colorado River Basin is such an important river basin in the entire West that most of that snow is in the high country of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, and we need to have big winters, for that water supply for the people and for the agriculture, for
mm.
food, for so many things.
That is so correct. Cold climates, just like summer climates, are important for all our ecosystems to thrive. And fortunately, they also open up opportunities for wondrous recreation.
Yeah, and one thing I
David,
would I would say to that is,
yeah,
um, a lot of people that like, they fancy themselves, and I'm one of them, sort of an all season mountain athlete, if you will. And that means in the wintertime, the bike might get put away. Used to put the bike away completely, and I wouldn't ride at all. I never ride an indoor bike. I just don't do it. Haven't done it for, actually, when I was hurt, um, I did a little bit of it just to get the range of motion, but I can't stand riding indoors. So it's skiing, and it's not just riding chairlifts. It's Nordic skiing, it's ski touring, it's backcountry skiing, all different kinds of skiing. Snowboarding obviously is a sport. There's people up here who are way into ice skating on natural lakes. I don't do that myself. I have done it. Um, but then, fat biking has really taken off around Gunnison because of our cold climate. Our fat bike riding in the winter is just phenomenal. So I will actually throw my leg over a bicycle now and then in the wintertime to go fat biking at a place nearby called Hartman Rock. So it gives you a mental break from maybe your main spring, summer, fall sport, whether it's running or cycling or whatever. And it also changes up how you use your body too. And so as a cyclist, I spin circles with my legs a lot. I don't do so much with my upper body. And in the wintertime, all of a sudden with skiing, with skate skiing, for example, you're getting the whole upper body involved. And with touring, you got your poles and you definitely involve some different and changed muscle groups. And then again, the mental break is pretty nice. We're excited to get on our bikes when we get on them in March or April because we haven't ridden for so long, especially on dirt or other surfaces that weren't snow or ice.
David, I find this fascinating. You have been biking at the very highest levels, and you are able to completely put away your bike for long durations in the winter while you recreate, cross train, etc. with your skis and your ski poles, because a lot of people would believe that somebody like yourself, in order to maintain your peak shape, you would need to be joined at the hip with your bike around the year. And I find that this is a theme that seems to play out with high level athletes in other sports as well. I recently had this amazing trail running couple, Tim and Diana Fitzpatrick. They do ultra runs, and the entire winter they're up in Tahoe ski patrolling. So they also take the entire winter off and they indulge in a very different activity. And it sounds like one is able to give the mind and body a break, but then continue to stay in shape and bring back that fitness back to either the running shoes or the mountain bike when the season begins again. I find that really interesting. I think there's like a lesson here for the rest of us, which is like, one doesn't need to obsess over one sport like the whole year round. One can actually take a break, walk away, and come back and still get back to peak fitness. But David, we'll get into some of that stuff a little bit later. But I want to actually go back a little bit to the beginnings, because many people on this pod, they may not have heard about your career as much. Every athlete has that first spark. Can you take us back to your early years? What first drew you to the outdoors? I know you grew up, I believe, in Colorado, but every person who grows up in a mountain state doesn't automatically gravitate to the outdoor sport. So, what was that spark that helped you discover mountain biking?
Hmm. Well, I grew up in suburban Denver, so in the suburbs of Denver. My parents both came from family farms, but from an early age, they took us into the outdoors, even though they didn't do it as children. We went camping, we went fishing. They took us skiing. We weren't, super avid skiers. We were very much, kind of weekend warrior type skiers. But they exposed my brother Brian and I, he's 3 years older, to a lot of the outdoors. And so there was always that. And then we also, when I was 6, we did a river trip on the Yampa River with another family, which was kind of cool. And I think that got in my head a little bit. And then, at around the age 14, I remember a buddy and I, we took these little vinyl rubber rafts that you could get from, Kmart or Walmart. And we took them on a little river near us in suburban Denver called Clear Creek. And there were little rapids. And, we were shooting the rapids in these boats. And that really piqued my interest in river sports. So I think, one of the first sports I really got into, and I was about 14, was running rivers. And that was rafting initially. Rafting led to kayaking. And at the same time, I was, my brother got me a job in a ski shop. And so I was already a skier, and he was a very avid skier from an early age. I wasn't as much, but then I really got into skiing too. So really through high school, I was all about whitewater kayaking and skiing. And I was definitely smitten with ski racing for a while and tried my hand at ski racing, but I come to it quite late. And, ski racing was a very well-established sport. And, if you weren't, on running gates from the time you were 6 or 7, you probably weren't going to be that good. And that was certainly the case for me. But at the same time, I always loved riding my bike. And but for me, I wasn't competing. I didn't do BMX. I didn't race on the road. Competing on my bicycle wasn't really what it was about. For me, it was about freedom. The bike allowed me to go places, go to my friend's house, go to the store. I even went golfing one time. I took my dad's golf clubs and I rigged them up so I could tow them behind my bike to the golf course. I loved being able to transport myself to places under my own power. So while I was skiing and kayaking, I certainly saw the mountain bike, and it was a pretty new thing, the specialized stump jumper. There were very few of them. And I for a while I called it the elusive toy. It was, I couldn't afford one. I had my quiver skis, I had the kayak, and all that gear, but I didn't have enough money to spend on a stump jumper at the time. Was, I think, $800 or $900, which, that was a ton of money for me at that time. But eventually, I was able to get a bike and started mountain biking. And Gunnison had a great racing scene when I first started riding in 1986, right around there. And some of my friends were going to bike races, and people took me to some, guys took me to a few bike races, and I was really hooked in pretty quickly because I had forgotten how much I enjoyed competition, and then that just dovetailed in with the training, which I didn't even really know what training was then. I just knew, okay, if you're going to be a bike racer, you should ride your bike all the time so that when you get to the races, you can do better. So then I lived in this place, Gunnison, where at the time there was no trail forks, there was no MTV project, this was just sort of, the Wild West. And I had a few maps, and the maps didn't really have bike trails on. So I explored this whole area. Crested Butte was a little bit more defined at that point because some folks had been riding up there for a few years, but it was all about exploring and being outside and being physical in the outdoors. So, I mean, that was sort of the path toward, to mountain biking, and obviously skiing stuck around. Haven't done as much of the whitewater, in recent years, but here and there I still have all my gear. I never get rid of any of my gear because I'm like, you never know when you're going to want to go kayaking again or whatever. So, and now all my stuff is pretty dated, that's for sure.
Funny you said that. I have snowboarding gear from 2009, I think. I haven't gone snowboarding again, but back in my mind, I'm like, I might need that
Yep.
stuff. I should hold on to it. Thanks for sharing that background. Two things I want to ask you. One is, you mentioned that your parents were not, let's say, outdoor athletes, but they seem to encourage you and your sibling going out. In fact, you went to the store and you got basic inflatable rafts and you were shooting down rapid. Most parents would be kind of scared of their kids trying, I don't know, doing that. Were your parents aware that you and your brother were up to that kind of, let's say, river mischief? And I know I'm guessing this is, pre-cell phones, pre-social media. And was it one of those like, what they don't know can't hurt them? Or did they actually encourage somehow that, hey, our kids are natural athletes and we should encourage them in these sports, which seem scary and seem difficult, but maybe that's how they will realize their gifts?
Yeah, I think they probably recognized that there was a dangerous element, but there's a little bit of that they're a bit naive. I mean, they sent me out on my bicycle without a helmet. You didn't have helmets back in those days, and I was riding all over the place. So there was that. But the one word that my parents have used to describe me is stubborn. I think they just knew that there was nothing they could do if I wanted something. I wanted to do something, and especially if it was something relatively wholesome, there wasn't much that they could do about it. And it's funny, you talk about social media and the internet, but the thing about the rivers was I read every book available at the time on rivers, and that was about 5 books. It didn't take long. And I was, okay, that was the body of information that was available. And I did get into rafting first. So at 16 years old, I had a 14-foot raft and a rowing frame and all this equipment. And my parents, I think they're just like, because it wasn't common then at that time, the mid to late 70s, to be that involved in river sports, for example, more so with skiers and ski racing, if you're from a family that chased that kind of thing. But ours didn't. But I think they've worried about me always, and my brother too. But they recognize that it's so important to us, and it's so important to our well-being that we do these things that they kind of throw their hands up. And you're right, that was a time when there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no communication. I would go with a group of guys to Mexico to run a river that had never been run before. And they're just, well, David's, gone for a week or 10 days. And I guess if he makes it, we'll hear back from him at some point. It was a different time. And now we've got in-reach devices and all kinds of of things like that. And, we can check in constantly, even out in the backcountry. Oh, I've got a cell signal. I'm going to text my wife and let her know everything's cool at this moment. It's changed the dynamic a lot. You can push a button and you might be rescued. Whereas there was a time when there was no button to push. And I think back to those times a lot. And I'm not going to say, hearken for them, but it was a time we were very fortunate to live that and not live in the hyper electronic, hyper connected world that we live in now.
David, thank you for taking us back to that era. I'm a little bit younger than you, but there's a couple of things I remember. As a rock climber, if one is over the age of 40, one would have absolutely read these two books, which were prevalent in climbing training, in the early 2000s, like Freedom of the Hills. And there was a book called Performance Rock Climbing. So,
I have Freedom of the Hills.
Nowadays, oh, there you go. So, yeah, with the proliferation of both social media and all these other ways which we can absorb content, self-publishing books has become so much easier. And like you said, nobody wants to go back to that era, but for sure there is a certain fondness with the community and the bit of the unknown that one has to face when one goes out and one doesn't have access to rescue services with our devices. It's amazing. I just feel fortunate that I've had the privilege of having lived to some degree through both those eras. Like there was that era, and then there's this era where you're right. I was just sending a text message to a friend of mine who was actually on this podcast, Catherine, who's doing another like a remote kayak trip through the Vancouver Island, and she has an inReach, and she's like, "Hey, okay, this is my number, and send me a message because I'll probably get lonely up there." And I sent her a message, and I got a reply right, but it's like it's funny how technology has come such a long ways. One other thing I wanted to ask you is, you talked about ski racing, and it sounds like you made some kind of a conscious decision that you had not been able to start ski racing early enough, even though perhaps you had the desire and the talent, but yet you did end up going the distance with mountain biking. Was there, and I'm thinking that today these sports are so specialized that even in mountain biking, like anything else, you really have to start at a very young age. So in that time, was there already maybe some distinction between these two sports where with mountain biking, you could still succeed if you started a bit later, but let's say in ski racing, you were maybe too old?
Yeah, absolutely. At that time, 1982, 83, 84, ski racing was well established. And the level of the athlete, while it's not what it is today, was very high. And I remember when I first had success in mountain biking at the highest level, to me, I always put that on a much lower tier than if I would have had success in ski racing, because the depth in the sport just wasn't there. It was brand new. I mean, I wasn't like at the very beginning of mountain bike racing, but I was pretty darn close. And so any sport that kind of comes out like that isn't it, not to belittle us or our era, but it's only going to have, athletes who are so good. Take my natural talent now and make it be 25 years old and stick it in today's mountain biking or off-road cycling environment. I might not make it because the level is so much higher now, and the depth is so much higher. I mean, there's so many more athletes that are vying for those top spots. Whereas, in my era, especially the late 80s, and the depth came in really quickly. Once the Europeans caught on, they're like, "Oh, this is racing bikes. We know how to do this. We do cyclocross. We ride on the cobbles. This isn't rocket science for us." And there's, millions of us who do it. So the depth in mountain biking certainly increased quickly, and we saw that. Myself and some of my contemporaries from North America, we kind of got, pinched out of racing the World Cup pretty quickly, just because it became so competitive. But yeah, if it's what I call the natural evolution of a sport, that it starts, tennis when it first, the original, you look back at those original tennis players and you're like, oh, those guys aren't that good. Football, it's the same. I mean, sports evolve over time. And I got into mountain biking at the ground level. So I was very fortunate. I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. I was in Gunnison, Colorado. The sport basically existed internationally in Colorado and California. I mean, that was about it. I mean, there was the odd racer from Utah or Massachusetts, but primarily it was, Tinker and Tomac were out in California at that time, and Ned Overend and me and some of the other guys were here in Colorado, and we would race all over the country, but it was a small crew. So that certainly contributed to my ability to break into the sport at that time.
Within the sport of mountain biking, what are you best known for? How do you describe yourself to the average person out there, David?
Well, I'll describe myself as just someone who loves to ride my bike and explore, but I'm most well known for the Leadville Trail 100, because that race went from being a very obscure race that not many people knew about to a race that a lot of people outside of mainstream cycling knew about because of Lance Armstrong taking an interest in it around 2007, 2008. But as far as competitively, I think I'm proud of those. Those were pretty fun. Those were really fun times to watch how that went from being, pretty low key to slightly more intense to what now is just over the top intense. It's so cool to see what's happened to Leadville. I mean, it doesn't even, I can't even find the Leadville that I know in the Leadville that I see today as far as the competition. It's at such a high level and there's so much depth. But I'm really probably more proud of that early era of mountain biking that you talked about with Tinker, because that was just such a special time. This new type of bicycle had come along and, people had started riding it. And of course, whenever people ride things, they find a way to compete somehow. And that's where racing came in. And racing is such a black and white activity. That it was fun to when I first started racing, if someone said, you're going to go race your bike in Europe, and eventually you're going to race it in China and Japan, New Zealand and Australia, and Hungary, I would have said, no way. And sure enough, within a couple of years, the World Cup pops up and we start racing World Cups, and, our sponsor Diamondback started sending us all over to race because people were interested in seeing this new activity, this new sport. That was the part I think that was probably the most fun and the most interesting. The cast of characters from that time, the other competitors, the support staff, everybody was, we were just I see it today with the Lifetime Fitness series, that it's the same cast of characters that travels around and they're all friends. They try to grind each other into pace out on the race course, but then they're buddies off the bike. And, that was the same thing that early mountain biking was like that. And it was, I feel so lucky to have been able to be a part of that. Leadville was a more solitary pursuit for me. At that time I was kind of done racing and I'd do one race a year. I'd do Leadville and, I'd go there and, generally my wife, Susan, supported me, and it wasn't, I wasn't part of a team that went there and interacted. I had the most interaction with the race organizers, Ken and Mara Lee, guy named Josh Cawley, Kimo Seymour, some of these folks, Rebecca Rush. Those were some of the fun folks that I remember from that era, but it wasn't as much of a community for me. That I was more intimate with the community of early mountain bike racing than the Leadville community. I'm a big part of that community. It's family, but I didn't know the people as well. And there were so many of them. There were literally, you go to that race and there's, a couple thousand people. So anyway, that's sort of, the way I think back on the mountain biking that I've done and what parts of it. But again, at the end of the day, what part are you most proud of? It's like, I'm most proud that I can throw my leg over a bike, right after this call if I want to, and go out and ride and have an experience either by myself or with my wife, or maybe I don't ride with other people a lot. I think a lot of athletes ride alone a lot because that's part of training. And I'm very content to do that. But just being out there, I just thank my lucky stars every time when I'm out there. Yesterday, I'm out on this trail and I'm just like, this is so awesome. This is so incredible. And it has nothing to do with posting on social media or other people, or it's just you and your experience with the trail and the natural world. And it's the same, I'm sure, in rock climbing, surfing, whatever activity it is that someone could have by themselves or with others, where they're just, this is just, I'm really fortunate.
We are indeed really fortunate. And it has to really be all about that intrinsic motivation. None of these sports will allow us to, uh, become very rich. I mean, sure, one can make a living, one can get maybe, mildly famous uh, amongst a community of other, geeks and diehards, but none of them will actually allow us too many more extrinsic things. So one really has to love doing them for the sake of doing them. David, you specialized, or you became well known for the Leadville race, and you've done a bunch of other things, including racing all over the world. And you're humble because you've also done a lot of things around the sport and advocacy. But I want to zoom out for a second around the largest sport of mountain biking per se. And I think maybe this question this question hits me because we've just had the Olympics, and mountain biking was introduced to the mainstream by the Olympics, let's say, in 1996. And your races like Leadville, I feel, are like a different beast entirely. So for those of us who have watched Olympic mountain biking, how does an endurance race like Leadville compare to what they see on the TV screens in the Olympics? Do you think the challenges of long distance mountain biking are understood by the general public?
Honestly, I don't. I think if someone's not a cyclist and they see the Olympic coverage, and then maybe they saw, Lifetime Fitness puts together great videos from the Leadville races, they're going to see those, and I think they'll look at them much the same, because if you don't have a discerning eye, you don't notice necessarily that the Olympic race is a 90-minute race, and those athletes are going, so incredibly hard for 90 minutes. But then now at Leadville, the way that they keep, breaking the record, those athletes are going, obviously you can't go as hard for, 5 or 6 hours as you can for 90 minutes, but they're still, the old cycling term, on the rivet, from start to finish in those races. But no, I think the average person, they're not going to understand the nuances, just like I don't understand the nuances so much when I see Formula One and NASCAR and things like that. I see cars racing, and it's interesting and it's exciting. But hopefully what some of them see is, I want to do that. I want to ride a mountain bike, not necessarily race a mountain bike, but that looks like a fun thing to do. It's obviously good for my physical fitness. They probably have no idea how great it is for their head to have a sport, again, whether it's climbing, surfing, mountain biking, whatever it is, how you initially might get hooked into it because it'll be fun and it'll help you with your fitness. But then you realize how important it is to take your mind off of the everyday, and make it focus on something, because you have to be focused to do this activity. Because if your mind wanders a little bit, you're not going to be able to catch the wave. You're going to crash. You're going to fall off the wall, whatever it is. And then hopefully they find a good entrance into the sport, because that can be really difficult. I think a lot of folks out there has thought about a lot of the outdoor sports and said, I want to do that. I want to go climbing, surfing, whatever. And then if you don't have a good on-ramp to the sport and you have a bad experience, there's a good chance you're not going to stick with it and you might bail. And I know this is certainly the case in mountain biking. And I feel like we've lost a lot of mountain bikers over the years that could have potentially come into our sport because they got taken on a hard trail right away. a trail that wasn't really good for them. One of the things that we have, and you mentioned advocacy, is we don't have a lot of beginner, family-friendly trails for mountain bikes. Um, Trails generally were built by mountain bikers, and we built two kinds of trails, hard and harder. And some people are athletic and aggressive, and they can make that work. Other people, it just doesn't work for them, and they like, you know what, this isn't fun at all. The bicycles are much better now. That's helpful. I've been involved in trail advocacy really my entire career. As soon as I got a mountain bike, I started looking around and going, there's not a lot of trails here. I wonder if we can do something about that. And, I've been, part of bringing more trails to my area and other areas too. And not just for mountain biking, for trail running and walking and dog walking and all of that. Trails are so valuable. But when when people think of the mountain bike industry, they think of the manufacturers of the equipment. But to me, the mountain biking industry is equal parts manufacturers of mountain bikes and mountain biking equipment and trails, because it takes those two pieces equally to create mountain biking. If you have a fantastic bike, but you don't have trails, it's not going to really do you any good. And likewise, if you have a great mountain biking
Right.
trail and you don't have a bike, it's not going to work. So I'd love to get people to start thinking more about the bicycle industry, including the trail building industry, because there's a big industry now. There's a lot of folks out there with expertise in planning, design, construction, maintenance of amazing trails. And, at IMBA, that's what we're trying to do, is help communities all across the country. IMBA is the International Mountain Bicycling Association, IMBA. Help communities realize great trails for their citizens and sometimes for visitors. Tourism is a part of that too. But I just think that, going back to your original thought of the Olympic mountain bike race or Leadville, it's hard to discern between those two for the average person. But hopefully the takeaway for many of them is, I'd like to give that a try. And hopefully we can keep them in the sport. And, climbing, surfing, skiing, mountain biking, cycling, gravel road. These are sports we can do until we're quite old. I liked playing football as a kid, American football. It was super fun. And then I got to play flag football as an older adult, and it was really fun. But as soon as I got to 45, I couldn't do it anymore. We weren't tackling or anything like that. It was just the sprinting and the cutting is so difficult. I think basketball is kind of like that. But cycling and some of these other sports, once you have the skills, you can really take those sports deep into your golden years, and it adds a lot of value, to our lives. And I think that's really important. It's one more reason for people, to start doing something in the outdoors, acquire that skill set, because, you don't just become an accomplished outdoor athlete overnight. It takes a little bit of time. But to be what I could call solid, if you're a solid, skier, solid mountain biker, solid, whatever, that means that you have the skills to go out and have a really good time, experience some amazing places, because unlike a tennis court or an ice rink, these activities happen in all of these amazing locations, all around the world. And certainly in our country and in your region where you live. It's a pretty special way to see some absolutely amazing things.
I love what you said, David, that the takeaway for somebody, the ideal takeaway for somebody who watches a gnarly outdoor sport go down in the Olympics, it could be, a mountain bike race. It could be somebody even, it could be like a swimming event. It could be a snowboarding event. It would be not so much to try and replicate that, but to go and grab a mountain bike, maybe go rent one, and find out what a trail is, find out where a trail can be found in their vicinity, and go and give it a shot. I think that is really, I think, the dream outcome of of participating in the Olympics or any, let's say, televised spectator sport. But one thing you also said, which I want to get your take on it. What you said was, when somebody goes and takes that bicycle and goes out on the trail, it has some kind of healing powers. It allows that person to find this joy, this sense of awe. And I also believe that is completely true. But I want to ask you, for that average person out there who may not even be a regular exerciser, may not even meet, let's say, indices for good health. Why is going outside in some ways and recreating outside even more important than going to, in my mind, a fitness facility and lifting weights? What is it about recreating in the outside that is so much more profound?
It would have to be just being in the outdoors, in and of itself, just the air, the light, depending on the time of day that you go out, the light can be completely different. If you live in an area where there is vegetation, there are trees, if there are mountains, feeling the air through, through your hair, if you're, doing anything with any sort of movement. If it's a little stormy outside, you know how it is. You have this heightened sense of wonder when it's a little bit stormy. And if you go into a gym, it's a great workout, but it's pretty static. There's going to be different people you're going to come across, but you're not going to have, different aromas that you're going to have in the outdoors. Like here, after a rainstorm, the sagebrush has a completely different aroma than when it's dry. And we talk about, the visuals of the light, and I love riding in the afternoon and the evening when the light gets low, and just different times of the year, like November sunlight is so much different than any other. Every time of the year has a unique sunlight because of the position of the sun. And the more you do these things, you start to notice little nuances like that. And then you add into that, the smells. I'm constantly aware of, and what a smell will often do is it'll take you back to a different time in your life immediately that you couldn't conjure that up in any other way other than you're like, oh, that reminds me of 15 or 20 years ago because it was a wet, musty forest smell, or, whatever, the salt water of the ocean. And then just coming back for a ride and seeing the moon come up at dusk. Those are things you don't see in a fitness center. And you don't get that giddy sort of sense of feeling small in a big expanse. Anyway, I don't know if that it's
No,
hard to
I think that's
describe.
that's
It's hard
great.
to describe.
That's great. No, for sure. Like, I used to lift a lot of weights in my 20s, and I can't really, I don't really think about those sessions in that sweaty gym with any kind of fondness. I'm glad I did that. I think it was good for my overall fitness. But I certainly can remember my very first climbing session. I can remember my very first bike surfing session. I can remember my first mountain biking session when I was a scaredy cat and I had to get off my bike many times. But I remember like so many things about those sessions. I like to think of playing in the outdoors in some way as moving meditation. I mean, it could be just a simple hike, but I think there's also that element where being outside, because of the dynamic nature of it, presents us with some risk, some need to be very mindful. One can be doing, let's say, I don't know if I'm riffing on gym for a second, but one can be lifting weights and it can become kind of mindless,
Yeah.
doing those arm curls or whatever. But when one is out there on a mountain bike and one has to be so aware of what's going on, like every element, because I think that challenge and the beauty helps us stay present. I want to talk about Leadville for a second. What makes the Leadville race so iconic in mountain biking? And what's been your history with it, David?
What makes Leadville so iconic, I believe, are at least three things. One is the elevation. It goes over 12,000 feet. It starts at 10,200 feet. So it's incredibly high. You can't find another event that's as high almost anywhere. Then it's 100 miles.
And sorry, and I think to remind the everyday person out there, often when you even go drive to something that as high as over 10,000, one is advised to acclimate. So like just existing in that air requires one to acclimate, and one can get sick just because one doesn't get
Yeah.
oxygen in that rarefied atmosphere. So you are out there racing your heart out for 100 miles. Sorry, I had to interrupt this
Yeah,
here.
yeah. No, the elevation is a big one. Leadville, the iconic, old mining town, is unique, and it's just a very special place. The founders of the race, Ken and Mara Lee, they've positioned the race as not being a race for professionals. It's a race for people. It's a race for everybody. They want to get everybody across the finish line. And now the professional race, since I've, was doing it, has become, very much in focus and very much a big part of the race. But you talk to Ken and Mara Lee, they'll still tell you, the winners of the race are no more important than these people who are just trying to make a cutoff. And that's a really, and that was the heart and soul of that race for a long time before it became wildly popular. There was always, well over 1,000 folks from all across the country. Ken would always say, every state is represented, and Arkansas. He had some quip about it. But you'd have these folks, and to your point about the elevation, they'd come from Florida, from Dallas, from all these places that were at sea level or barely above, and they don't have time to come acclimate for 3 weeks. They're going to come up, with their family, maybe a couple days before the race and do this great challenge. So, that's really, I think, a lot of what has made Leadville pretty amazing. On the pro racing side of it, seeing the record continue to drop is really interesting and exciting for people. To see the quality and the depth of the field, both men's and women's, at the pro level is really interesting. So it has evolved in a number of ways, and some people will lament that evolution and kind of hearken for the old days. But what I always tell people like that is, if you go out on that course, that's never changed. St. Kevin's climb, power line descent, the climb up to Columbine, that stuff is all as it has been for, since the race started. And this year, I think, was the 30th running of the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike. So it has a bright future. It's not going anywhere. It's as close to a one-day classic as we have in the United States. And it's so cool that it's bringing road cyclists, gravel cyclists, mountain bikers together. A skimo athlete, John Gaston, he gets second or third every year. And I don't know that he does any other bike races. It's really fun to see. But it's been fun to watch how the Leadville race has grown and evolved, and that I can turn my TV on now and I can get a recap of the race. That's also pretty cool, because there was a time when there was nothing.
It's a famous race, and you have helped, let's say, shepherd it into the mainstream spotlight. I want you to help take us into what it feels like to actually be in Leadville doing that race. And I am using this little analogy where I do a tiny bit of biking, both road and mountain, and I am afraid of biking in a pack, even on the reliable, flat, gravel roads we have here in Northern California. Just being in a pack, just next to other cyclists in close proximity, uh, kind of seems terrifying to me, especially when one is going down, let's say, US 1 on the coast. But when you are in a mountain bike race like that, you have all of that. Plus, you have this crazy terrain full of rocks and branches, and you're racing your heart out, going as fast as possible. So, how do you prepare for something like that? How do you stay composed? How do you stay safe? And more than anything else, how are you able to bring out your best in that incredible environment?
Well, for me, I'm not a big fan of pack riding. I didn't grow up, road racing. There's a lot of riders out there that feel really comfortable riding in those packs. It can be fast and crazy, and they're just completely content. I always have been terrified of that part. So depending on the race, the start is always very important to me to get through that part because very quickly in mountain bike racing, it starts to stretch out and it's not near as crazy. Leadville just happens to be a downhill paved start and it's cold. Usually it's about in the high 30s, low 40s. You've got a very generally inexperienced field. Now there's corrals now, so there's a pro corral, and obviously that's not an inexperienced group. But as they let each of those groups go, they used to just let everybody go at once, and you're flying before you know it down the hill, making turns, intersections where they're controlled, but you're still, everyone has to make a turn, and then a hard 90-degree turn to the left across some railroad tracks, and a quick 90-degree turn to the right onto dirt, and then you're narrowed up and it strings out and it's going to become a little bit less intense. It's flat. You're not going to be going as fast. But I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of trepidation about the start of Leadville, and then maybe they've taken care of this with the corral starts. But what used to happen further back was that St. Kevin's, the first steep climb, it would just jam up and bottleneck, and people were actually just stopped waiting because you got to kind of wait for. And we used to experience that in World Cup racing when they didn't really know how to put courses together, and they would start 250 people at once and send us all through like a single stone gate that only one person could walk through. I mean, I remember this happening, and you look over and there's people climbing the fence and course tape on their helmet running up the hill. Crazy times. But I think that's one of the things that people. And you know what? Some of the folks that are brand new in there may not even have thought it through to the point to even understand that that's all going to happen. If someone just said, "Hey, you should do this race," and they did, they got in somehow, and they're like, "Oh, great, I want to go there." Other people will do their research and they'll know, okay, this is going to be interesting, or they'll ride the start before the race and go, okay, this is going to be interesting in a big group. I'll tell you a story. One of the years I didn't race, after I was done doing my races, I watched the start. I was just maybe an eighth or a quarter of a mile from the starting line, and they said go, and this is when the entire pack would go, and I'm on the sidewalk, and there's a no parking sign next to me, a steel sign post with a steel sign, and all of a sudden, this thing just starts quivering because of the physics of all these bike riders on the pavement. I was blown away. I was like, "Well, that is crazy." But anyway, Leadville, like all races, does string out to a certain extent. But you've got some groups that stay together, and there's pack tactics going on. And some people, if you're not experienced, drafting is super scary and you don't want to overlap wheels. If someone makes a sudden move and your wheels are overlapped, things can happen. And, there's certainly crashes out there. But again, that's what makes it, you mentioned it earlier, that little bit of risk or a lot of risk in some cases makes it really special, especially when you're done. Especially when you finish something like that, because you could be out there going, "This is terrible. I hate this. This is scary. This is hard. I'm never going to do this again." And then you finish, and then you still feel that way. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you're like, "I'm pulling back. That was so great. I can't wait to do that again." And then you find yourself right back there going, "What am I thinking?"
No, that I love that about type 2 activities. You dread like those big days in the mountains, and there's fear, there's trepidation, there are those, there's all of that, and then obviously there's pain and suffering. But then once you're done, you're like, "Gosh, I want that. I want that again. I want more of that." So
Yeah, it's a real thing.
anyway, again, it's a real thing. David, you've been a champion for the sport, through all your successes with Leadville and outside. But you've also been a champion off the trail with your work with bike advocacy through IMBA that was just mentioned. What first inspired you to take on advocacy in trail building? And then like how did that become such an integral part of your career?
Yeah, it started as soon as I started racing, and I was interested in racing, and I was going to try to be the best racer I could be. But then racing just didn't take all that much time. I didn't even know what training was to start with, so I was just going out and riding my bike. We were our own mechanics. We didn't have mechanics. We didn't have any support. So, we did all of our own bike work, but it still didn't take that much time. And I just looked at where I lived in the areas of public lands that we had, and there wasn't a lot of single track trail. So that's how the advocacy around Gunnison got started. And immediately already in the late 80s, I was involved in the trail advocacy here and creating more and better trails for riding. And, eventually I started the local organization because we didn't have a local advocacy group. Crested Butte does have one and did have one in the late 80s, the Crested Butte Mountain Bike Association. They're the oldest mountain biking advocacy group on the planet. Gunnison didn't have that. Occasionally, the folks from Crested Butte would come down and help us out, but that we just didn't have it down here. And finally, at some point, I think our trails were really starting to fall into disrepair between rain and use. They were big ruts, and people weren't riding them anymore. And I said, we've got to start something, and we've got to start maintaining our trails. So I started an organization called Gunnison Trails, and we started maintaining trails. And then we started educating trail users, and then we started working on new trails. So that were the three pillars of our mission: maintain, educate, and build. What I try to do now with IMBA is we just try to be that resource for, that 11 years it took to get trails on the ground here. That can be shorter or longer depending on where you're at. And some people don't really understand how to go about, taking that process on. And that's really one of the things we really specialize with at IMBA, is helping communities through that cycle from all the way through to finished and maintained trails on the ground. And there's a lot in there. You have to have access. You have to have the permission of the land owners to put the trails on the ground. You need a plan. We used to never plan trails. We would just build a trail here, build a trail there. And now we're kind of saddled with some of these networks that don't function near as well as they can. Now, if we get the opportunity, we'll do a complete comprehensive plan of an area first. And we won't just talk about mountain biking either. We'll talk about hiking, trail running, dog walking. I mean, people walk their dogs every day, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, rain or shine. Dog walkers are huge trail users. Equestrian use is a thing in some places. Now we've got e-bikes. There's traditional motorized use. Harbin Rocks is a traditional motorized area. Some of the area, Monarch Pass and Crested Butte, are also traditionally motorized. So there's a lot of different elements. And what we're trying to do at the end of the day is make sure that everybody that goes out on a trail, regardless of how they use that trail, walking, trail running, mountain biking, whatever, they have a great experience. And some of the uses are slightly incompatible. And as mountain bikers, our biggest challenges are we're super quiet and we're pretty fast, particularly on the downhills. And we sneak up on people and we sneak up on wildlife. And those are things that we need to consider and to think about, how we interact with the natural world, how we interact with other trail users, how we interact with each other. And there's we've got tools in the toolkit to help us with that. Directional trails, trails that are specific to certain uses. If we want to have directional mountain biking trails, then we better be ready to offer some trails where mountain bikes aren't allowed, so that hikers and trail runners, and in some places equestrians, can kind of relax a little bit. And maybe you've seen it when you're riding, but we surprise hikers a lot. Or you'll see a family getting ready to go for a hike on a mountain bike, and they're like, "Okay, kids, you got to listen really carefully for the mountain bikers. If you hear a mountain bike coming, you got to get off the trail." So those are real things, and we need to, in my opinion, always be thinking about them and think about how we can make sure that everybody has a great experience on trails, because they're so valuable to our health and wellness. That if you're talking about the person that may watch the Olympic mountain bike race, but they're sedentary, even if that person said, "You know what, I think I'm just going to start walking 3 times a week, and there's some brand new trails I just heard about, right over here in my neighborhood," and they get outside and they walk a mile loop 3 times a week. Think about how much healthier they're going to be. think about their mindset, how it's going to shift just by being out there and the
Mm.
things they'll think about, the things they'll see. Those are game changers in people's lives. And so at IMBA, and we're not the only ones, a lot of folks out there really see trails as being hugely valuable to people and communities and something that no community should be without.
The work that has gone into building trails, maintaining access, and furthering the cause of outdoor recreation via IMBA and maybe other organizations, I think is inspiring. Not just to the average recreational user, but I think to other outdoor sporting groups as well. I see this in the world of climbing, where these two groups that I think exist also in mountain biking. You have, let's say, land managers and landowners who are providing access, and then you have land users, and you have mountain bikers and other people who are using these systems, these trails. Coming back to you now and zooming into perhaps your life and your career, you have been mountain biking, I'm guessing, for like 5 decades now, like half a century. Probably crazy if you think about it. At the same time, you have evolved out of, let's say, competitive racing. You have shepherded organizations. You also started a family. How have you made a living through all of these years? Mountain biking is a time consuming sport per se. Have you had a parallel, let's say, career of sorts, or have you been able to find a livelihood through this sport that you love?
Yeah, mountain biking um, paid the bills through 2004, just being a professional racer, and that was just the time. There's still a handful of folks that aren't at the highest level that are making money, but back then it was the factory team that the Tinker talked about. You'd have primarily one sponsor, and it was a bike industry sponsor, and they paid you salary, and that was right through 2004, and that was a like you said, it wasn't getting rich, wasn't, going out and buying apartment buildings. But it was a good living. And my wife did the same thing until through 1996. And then we started a family, and then she went back to work as a nurse. So we were a double income, pretty typical double income family. And then from 2006 to 2000, and, for about 10 years in there, I had, just a basket of things that I was doing, and it was Gunnison Trails, the local organization. And one of the things that the folks at IMBA taught me right away is they said, Dave, our best local organizations have at least a part-time paid executive director. So that became my marching orders with starting Gunnison Trails, is to make it a paid position. So I started the organization in 2006. In 2008, I started a mountain bike race here in Gunnison called the Original Growler. Well, the Original Growler quickly grew into something that kicked out a net of $40,000 or $50,000 a year. So all of a sudden, I was able to go from bankrolling this organization myself for a couple of years to paying myself $500 a month, which wasn't a lot. But eventually, by the time I left, I was getting a part-time salary of $25,000 or $30,000 a year. Then I was also working part-time for the university, Western Colorado University. I was the director of and the creator of their mountain sports program, which is, competitive
Oh,
mountain
cool.
biking, trail running, all different disciplines of skiing. We have rock climbing now. It's a really cool outdoor mountain sports program. And I was also doing some work for Lifetime Fitness around the Leadville Race Series. And then I'd had a relationship with Ergon, bicycle ergonomics in the bicycle industry. So I had this, this sort of package of professional pieces that I put together as a contractor, and made that work for 10 years, and then started with IMBA in 2017, and I've been there ever since. So I went to school. I came to school in Gunnison so I could be chipping away at a degree and paddle my kayak and ski. Eventually that turned to mountain biking. the year I graduated was the year I signed my first pro contract. So that was cool. But what I wanted to do, if I were going to join the real world workforce, was make skiing and kayaking films. Because at that time, there was Warren Miller and a filmmaker named Greg Stump, and that was about it. And now, of course, there's tons of those filmmakers. So I might have been in the right place at the right time for that. Had I been any good at it, the jury was out on that part of it. But that didn't happen because mountain biking came along, and I was really happy and felt fortunate to get to do that. I met my wife through mountain biking. I mean, our whole family, everything I have really came from being a professional mountain bike racer, back in those early days. So no laments or regrets on my career choice. And I'm still enjoying what I do. And I think there's a lot more out in front of me as well.
Well, let's say the loss that the world of filmmaking has because you were not out there making films has maybe been made up by your contributions to the world of outdoor sports and outdoor sports advocacy, conservation, and even education. And what I love about, like how you said, you were able to cobble together these different things, but they carried the strong central theme where there were synergies between everything that you did because the work you were doing in one area informed the other and maybe made your work in education richer because you were out there doing other things. And I think it takes a certain level of talent, will, and enterprise to be able to build a career out of outdoor sports. Once, let's say, well, one is like one has to be the very best to be a paid professional, right? That's, yeah, mainstream sports, one can probably do that even in the lower leagues, but in our outdoor sports, one has to be the very best. And then once the era of being a paid pro is over, one has to be creative in many ways. And yeah, congratulations on being able to build this mosaic of a career that you have. We just talked about how long you've been mountain biking for, David. And anytime one does a sport for that long, one can have both physical and mental berms, to use one of your terms. Have you found some of these bumps in your career as well? Let's start with like the psychological ones. Have there been times when maybe you woke up one day and you weren't psyched to go out and rip the trails? How have you been able to overcome some of these mental blocks?
Well, that one in particular, what I always try to do if I don't feel like going out and riding is recognizing, and this came from experience, that oftentimes getting out the door is the hardest part. And sometimes you just don't want to go, and you make yourself go, and you get out there and you realize you feel real good and you have a great day, or you don't, you continue to feel like a slug. And Susan and I have that all the time. And you just go through the motions. But I think this relates back to a habit I formed when I first started racing, was taking all of my race numbers and pinning them up on this wall in this spare room of my house. And the big important race that I won went right in with the races where I did terribly or were mediocre or whatever. And sort of the idea there was, it takes all of those. You need to have all of those days to create, whatever it is that you're chasing. It's not going to be the podium every single time you go out there. In fact, it's going to be a lot less of the podium than those days where a World Cup race my second year, where I was pretty sure I had arrived and I was, going to dominate in this sport. And I had such a pathetic race that when I finally crossed the finish line, they were taking the finish line down. They'd already given away the prizes and people were gone and they're disassembling the structure. And I come across the finish line, and to me, that's always been part of it, is you got to take it all, because it's all part of the experience that you have. on the training front, and I haven't been training recently, but I did, I trained obviously when I was racing cross countries. And then when Leadville got serious, the last 3 or 4 years, I dusted off my training and I started training again, but I always wrote my training down in pencil. And I was very quick to change things up within my week. Like if I had said, I'm going to do a 6-hour ride on this day, if it didn't feel right or circumstances weren't quite right to do it, I wouldn't fret about it and go, oh, I've got to do this. It'd be more like, well, I can move it here and do this and just make those adjustments on the fly and be okay with them, because I feel like the whole training thing is kind of a bit of as much as a lot of coaches would like to tell us it's just like this, I don't really believe it is, especially for someone with a mindset like mine. I think it's, you can move pieces around and still have a great day. You can have everything just right and have a terrible day. So that's how it would relate to actually specific training. So I tell people, in my opinion, there are no absolutes. I think in our world, sometimes you get people saying, oh, you have to do this with your nutrition, or you have to do this with your training, or the day before race, you have to do this. And then some people hear that and they think, I didn't do that. And then they set themselves up for potential failure. So I tell people there are no absolutes. Don't ever let somebody tell you that you need to line up no matter what you've been doing. You need to be realistic. If you haven't been training, chances are you're not going to win the race. But you needed to line up kind of thinking that you can have a great day. And to do anything other than that is doing yourself a disservice, and you're setting yourself up to fail when you didn't necessarily need to, because sometimes our mind can convince our body that it's not a good day. And that's the worst thing. So every time I line up, no matter how I feel, if I've had a horrible week of training leading up to a race, I'm still like, I might win this thing. You just never know. And sometimes I went out and I felt great and I had that day. Other times not. But you know what? Then you just keep looking ahead.
Getting out the door sometimes is the hardest thing. Yes, that is.
And how good do you feel when you come back in the door after almost not going out and getting on the couch with a bag of chips? Instead, you forced yourself out there, and then you had one of those magical days, and you came back and you're like, yes.
I like to joke that one of my favorite things after a big day outside is to simply come back, open the car door, shake my butt down, take a couple of sips of my leftover coffee from the morning, and find that buried bag of chips and have a couple of chips. And I think we're all aligned on owning our bit of creature comfort. It's the best thing. David, you are about to turn 60, like you told me earlier. So happy early birthday.
Thank you.
And you're also just about to go on another epic bike race. How has your physical training evolved again over the decades? What are the things you do today? One thing that we spoke about is the importance of giving your body rest, not for a day, a week, a month, but maybe an entire season, and taking part in a very different sport. Outside of that, what are some other things that the rest of us can learn from in being able to continue training as we get older?
Well, the first thing I think about when I hear that question is where I am in my life and what my goals are as far as training and how that might relate to competition. I haven't competed a lot recently in the last couple of years, but if excellence in a competition is important to you, then you need to train a certain way. And then you need to be more careful with everything you do, including rest. That's not me. My goals are to be outside, doing what I love to do as much as possible, knowing that doesn't always lead to better performance in a given event. But what I'm in it for isn't necessarily to get, first or 8th or 10th or 12th. It's to enjoy that journey leading up to it. And the journey leading up to it is me being able to not really worry about doing the kind of outdoor activities that I want to do. And I want to do them as much as I can. And I probably do more than I should for optimal performance. But optimal performance has dropped down as far as a priority. Back when I was racing cross country and when I was lining up for those 8 Leadvilles, I was all about optimal performance. So my training reflected that. Now, I just want to be pretty good if I can, and prove to myself that I can, have a race smart, last, and ride pretty well. And that's really how I've approached racing the last, say, 5 years. And it is with more of a focus on what I want to do as far as preparation. And that's probably a lot less or no intervals. I'm not going out and doing 20/40s. I'm not doing, 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off, all that kind of stuff, which I love doing that. That was fun. I mean, I love to train because training is like going to the bank and depositing, making a deposit because you get to take that money out on race day. When you line up on the line, if you're confident that you've put in the good training, you have that much more confidence when you're on the starting line. But anymore, for me, it's I want to be outside. I want to be doing the rides I want to do. I want to ride to the way I feel that day. I kind of tend to ride at this one pace all the time. If a coach would analyze me, he or she would probably say, you ride in zone 3 or zone 4 almost all the time. And that's not good for you. I'm like, yeah, but that's sort of my default. I call it my default pace. That's just how I ride. And it's probably a little harder than it should be, but not as hard as it should be if I'm trying to actually train at times. But at this point in my career, I don't care. The race that I'm going to do on Saturday, the Vapor Trail 125, is so long for me at this point in my career that I didn't feel like there was anything I could do that could prepare me for it other than to ride as much as I could. Did a couple bike packing trips, and I'm just going to go out there and pace myself really well. It starts at 10 p.m., so I'm not going to sleep the night before. I'm going to have to ride the lights on. I'm not really big on riding with lights. And it's just going to be, but for me, the appeal was the challenge. I did the very first Vapor Trail in 2005, I think. It was a different course then. I was younger. I was doing a lot of endurance racing. It's going to be a lot different now, exactly almost 20 years later, because I am a lot older. I'm not going to have near as I won't be gunning for the win. I'll be gunning to not turn my lights back on later in the day. But it still has given my summer that much more sort of motivation, having that carrot out there.
Nothing beats having that carrot, that project, that goal, and having that in front somewhere, maybe even sometimes, I don't know, publicly announcing it to just set that intention that creates that bit of pressure, healthy pressure. One thing I did want to ask you, David, about, again, looking at your career, both on and off the bike, you competed at the highest levels in endurance sports. And mountain biking, from what I know, has remained relatively clear of the doping controversies that have touched other sports like road cycling. You were competing with and alongside big names like Lance Armstrong and Floyd Landers, and I think you even beat them in the past. How did you navigate that era? And what are your thoughts on maintaining fairness and integrity in outdoor sports?
I think it's a huge deal to maintain that integrity and to know that everybody is clean on the start line. And prior to Leadville, my time at Leadville, and I don't think there was any doping going on then, but the 90s were known as the EPO era in cycling, and mountain biking was not immune to that. And if you go back and you research some of the mountain biking world champions from the 1990s, you'll come up with some folks who tested positive for EPO and maybe some other things. So, most of us.
Sorry, what's EPO?
Erythropoietin It's a
Okay.
it enhances your red blood cells. So be so then once they had a test for EPO, the athletes started to do blood transfusions.
Right.
So it was a
Yep.
synthetic
Yep.
way,
Yep.
I guess, to
Yep.
essentially do that. But those of us that like the Americans, like the original mountain bikers, because I think we all feel like the late '80s and the early '90s were clean, 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 clean. And then as soon as the sport kind of went over to Europe, and nothing against Europe, but that's where the road cycling doping culture was, just acute, and it found its way into mountain biking. And you can see that by just doing a little bit of research. You'll come up with these names of folks that either gave their title to the second place rider, which happened, or riders that were subsequently tested positive in later races that maybe didn't lose their titles. But that was at the same time that we were kind of getting pushed out of the sport too. And a lot of us we felt like maybe that's what it was, and I don't think doping was huge in mountain bike racing, but there certainly were some of the names at the very top that were proven to have been doping, and that changes the dynamics throughout the field. So that was in some ways that's where you saw a lot of us Americans pull back and stop racing World Cups in the '90s, because we could continue to race what was called the Northern National Series, and it was high level racing, and we felt that it was pretty clean. They don't have tests for a lot of this stuff. And I don't know what's happening now. I don't really follow cycling anymore, but you hear, here and there, you'll hear a little something. So I hope it's all clean. I hope all of sport is clean, because so many young kids aspire to be successful in sports at the highest level, regardless of what sport it is. And to know that, oftentimes, or in some situations, it's not fair, and you would need to do these things to compete. That's
Yeah.
really,
Mhm.
that's not a great situation. So the doping's a tough one, and certainly, we went through it in our era, and yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff is relatively public from the 2000s, and there was the Festina scandal that really started it on the road, and that actually has some strands that go down into mountain biking. And it is what it is, but it's a bummer. And I think anytime you have suspicion and money, you have the ingredients for cheating. You know, it's pretty simple from that perspective, whether cycling or whatever. If you can make a lot of money or maintain the money that you're making now, and you have any sort of suspicion or like, well, what's he doing? What's she doing? Then you can, rationalize it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate your thoughts there. Nobody gets into these sports, I think, other than, yeah, the sheer love of doing these sports. But sometimes money and maybe other external pressures can add corruption to the noblest of ambitions. It's a tough one.
But the good news is,
Thanks.
the good news
Yeah.
is, that world aside, whether it exists or not, if we're just in it for ourselves and for the benefits that it gives us, which 99.9% of us are, we're just
Yeah.
happy we can go, ride or surf or ski or whatever. And if we like to compete, we jump in there and do that a little bit. And that whole world of doping is, I think it's definitely, several steps removed from the core activity and the core benefit that all of these sports have for people.
100%. Absolutely. No, I think, I think nobody listening should go away thinking that the sport itself is tainted. And then it's more that all of us these days, again, because of, all of us these days, I think we do derive some inspiration from these races, from these big events, from these icons of the sport. And yeah, it is just one of those facets that is helpful to know about, that there are these, like anything in life, there's like there can be a dark side
Sure.
with all the other positivity out there. Uh, we're moving to the end of our conversation. Maybe just a couple of questions, David. A bit about nutrition, right? How do you how do you like to fuel yourself for a big day on your bike? Maybe a couple of days leading into it, and then the day of the bike itself. I sense that along with some of your other time honed strategies of training and performance, you probably have found what works the best for you. Would love for you to share how do you maintain your nutrition?
Yeah. So our diet, I talk about that because our is my wife Susan and I, is just a well balanced, well rounded diet. We're not on any diet. We eat a little bit of everything. We eat fruits and vegetables. She doesn't like to eat as much meat. I don't eat as much red meat, but I do like a burger or a steak now and then. We'll eat chicken. We eat quite a bit of fish. We like salmon. Lots of fresh vegetables, lots of salad. And you know what? That's the time consuming part, is prepping. Prepping veggies is hugely time consuming. And that's why I think a lot of people don't do it. But typical for me before race, I like pancakes. I'll do French toast. So there's usually an egg or two involved. There's usually some whole grain or even white flour type of stuff involved. There's always a banana in there. I mean, I'm a traditional pasta before race guy. I don't eat meat the night before race. And my wife does, or would, and always encourages our son, who does a little bit of racing, to do that. I don't. I just have like a veggie based pasta and some salad. Pizza will work in a pinch. Just from experience, I want to know that I could actually eat just about anything and hopefully do okay, because sometimes you can't get what you want, and you have to eat something weird or different, and that shouldn't throw you off. If everything has to be just so, then that leaves you vulnerable to times when you can't find certain things. So we like sweets. My sweet tooth is cookies, ice cream, cake now and then. Susan will make a wicked carrot cake or zucchini bread with chocolate chips in it. And then chips. I don't eat tons of junk food. We don't eat fast food. But we eat a little bit of everything, and try to eat in moderation as much as possible, and not snack. I try not to snack, because snacking is when you work around the house. I don't know if you have that situation, but the refrigerator and the pantry are always right there. And then I'll go bike packing, and I'll think my caloric intake on this bike packing trip is way less than I eat when I'm at home working around the office, because I don't have access to all that food, nor because I'm riding my bike between meals, I'm not even thinking about it. It's really strange, but we exercise to eat to a certain point. I think some people that exercise a lot have that sort of, eating is one of those pleasures of life, and we don't want it to be such a torturous experience that we can't, enjoy what we like to eat. So pretty well rounded, not a lot of rules, but overall, I think our diet is pretty healthy.
Sounds well rounded. What do you eat, or what do you plan to eat when you are on this gnarly sounding Weibo Trail race this weekend? Are you going to carry a bunch of bars, hydration drinks?
Yeah, I'll have a hydration drink. Use the Goo Roctane is what I've been using now for years, and I'll have that mixed up in my bottles. Now, the thing about these long races is you're never sure what you're going to get in the aid stations, and I'm going to rely on the aid stations. I like, Susan's like, "You want me to support you out there?" I'm like, "No, that's the last thing you want to do. I know is drive around and support me in a race." And I kind of like the idea of just being, completely self-contained. I'm going to have a few of the things to start with. You don't want to carry a bunch of extra weight. And then I'm going to lean on the aid stations. And if they're serving peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I'm going to eat that. If I get into the aid station first thing in the morning and they've got pancakes or egg burritos, that's what I'm going to eat. I'm going to not eat too much. But then I'll always have a Bobo bar. That's what I've had lately in my pocket. And I'll carry the same Bobo bar, and I won't eat it unless I need it. But if I blow out there on a training ride or something, then I'll eat it. And I've had pretty good success eating those bars in some of the races that I've done over the last 4 or 5 years. But I'm more of a real food guy during these longer races. So if there's a turkey sandwich up there at the top of Monarch Pass, when I hit it around 10 a.m. or noon, I'll have a few bites of that and just try to keep that fuel going, and then stay on top of the hydration. And I'll fill my bottles with whatever they have there. I'll be able to do one drop bag, so I'll have my own stuff there. But it's so long that I'm going to have to lean on the aid stations, and being confident that I'm not going to worry about what I can or can't get at those aid stations. I think that's a helpful mindset to have for me. It's just I'm gonna take it as it comes, and I'm gonna be somewhat planned out, but I don't have an alarm set. I don't count calories. I don't do any of that. I go by feel. I've never used an SR a power meter. I have no idea when people are talking about watts. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know a thing about that.
That's funny because when I speak with other bicyclists, they're always talking about like wattage, and I feel a little ignorant, but it's funny that you have
Not a clue.
you have
I mean, I know that
competed
the
at
higher
highest
number
levels,
is
but
better.
I didn't. Okay,
400
I mean,
watts
sure,
or
of course, of course. Yeah, of course. I know that if you're driving a stick shift and you on overdrive on sixth gear, that's gonna be at a higher RPM and at a higher speed. We over time. Are you okay going over a few more minutes,
Sure.
David? I apologize.
Yeah.
We ran over a little bit. A couple of final questions, fun questions before we end this call. David, what has perhaps been the most significant habit or behavior in the last several years which has had an impact on your well-being?
Um, for me, and this goes back as far as I can remember, is just having a positive attitude and outlook, and no matter what happens, just always trying to spin it in a positive way. And I think I'm fortunate and blessed in that I trend positive automatically, and that's a big benefit. And I don't know that everybody necessarily their brains are wired that way. Some people might be wired more to pessimism than optimism, but I feel like I'm wired to optimism, and I also focus on it as sort of a mindset that no matter what happens, how can I make this positive? And I don't like to complain, and I really try to teach these values to our kids. Don't complain about something, do something about it. I think that's really the attribute that is the most important to me, and one that I'll really try to continue, because it's hard sometimes, and that you get a little bit down, and now we're getting older. I mean, we know that aging is a difficult process, and there's going to be lots of challenges, and hanging on to that positive mindset is always going to be a challenge, and probably get more challenging, the longer we live. But I just heard an interview on NPR. This woman, they were talking to octogenarians, and she was 103, and what is it? What's your secret? She goes, I just have always had a real positive attitude, and no matter what happened, I try to put a smile on my face, and I just that just validated it for me that this is a good way to live if you can.
Mindset is really everything. I mean, it's easier said than done for sure, because we all find ourselves in those troughs. You mentioned before we started recording that you had a traumatic physical injury last year, which may have affected you physically for sure, but which may have affected maybe your outlook and your mindset and maybe your prospects going into the future. I'm curious if you had to dig into your mindset, this outlook that you spoke of, and how that may have enabled you to get over those physical and those mental demons and get back into shape.
You use the words dig in, and I don't feel like I really needed to dig into it. What's really interesting about an injury like that, and it was a badly broken femur skiing, and it was in 8 or 10 pieces down low, not a nice clean break up in the middle, mid shaft, as they call it. But, and it was, comminuted, which means it was, very broken and split all the way up toward my hip. Anyway, a 15-inch plate and 16 screws. And, but once that happens, then at least for me, it becomes, my reality. And so getting back from that reality was what my marching orders were. And I don't ever remember being despondent. I remember being bummed. I remember breaking down and kind of welling up and crying in front of Susan one time, just because it was, I'd never been hurt. And, I loved to be, athletic and outdoors and active so much that it was kind of hard. And I was training for, all these ski mountaineering races. And it was just like that, and I was fit. I was really at the top of my game being 58 years old, whatever that means at 58. I was skiing well for my ability and going up hills well and all that. And just like that, it's a wholly, totally different landscape. But I remember just sort of, it wasn't what I couldn't do. It was what I could do. And what I could do initially wasn't a whole lot. Read books, and you got to let that thing heal up. But as soon as the doc said I could, I'm in the swimming pool and I'm swimming, and I swam every day I didn't miss a day until they had to clean the pool and it was closed for 2 days. When
Oh,
I
wow.
did start to travel a little bit, I would find a pool wherever I went. I swam in Bentonville, I swam in Durango, I swam in Denver, and I was just religious in the pool. And I'm not a swimmer. I did a little swim team when I was a kid, so I know how to swim. But it was really important for me. So I took that time that I would have been outdoors skiing and hiking and mountain biking and all that, and I just put it into my physical therapy. And that meant some funky, mundane exercises indoors with with an elastic band and a medicine ball and on a table. And, I can hardly even think back to those times of when I was confined to one floor of the house. But I feel like I need to double check with Susan because she lived it. Like I had a pretty good attitude. I was
Mm.
pretty good overall. And now, honestly, I feel like if I didn't know it had been broken and someone told me that I had broken it, I would say, really?
Wow.
The doc put it, I got that hardware removed. The plate is out. It's around here somewhere. The screws. I was very happy to get that out of there. 'Cause I didn't want that stuff to be in there. Once it heals, it doesn't need to be in there. And that was last February. But I feel good. I did a long bikepacking trip. I did a gravel race. I'm riding just like I always did. I bought a ski pass this winter. I'm going to ski. So, again, mindset, attitude, looking on the positive side, because first of all, I got hurt in a very privileged way up skiing. Okay. If you get, there's other people that are getting injured in ways that are much more tragic. That is not tragic. That's just, yeah, you were out there, having fun and you got hurt. Um, and, we also have the means I can still work, the next day I opened my laptop, I can still work. So I wasn't impacted in a lot of ways. I was very fortunate all the way around. And I really tried to focus on all of that. And as an athlete, just to be an athlete is a privilege. So it's kind of a privilege to be hurt as an athlete too,
Yeah.
because not everybody gets that opportunity, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah. And go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that part of my thinking on signing up for the Vapor Trail, which is this Saturday, was okay. You had this injury. This will be a kind of a good test for you, something to look for, something to keep you focused. And you're going to turn 60 during the race. That's also ironic and interesting. And now, in these last couple of days, I'll go from being super psyched to kind of scared or really scared because it's all that stuff. Riding at night, it's going to be cold. You're in the middle of nowhere. What if my hands quit working? Because, as I get older, your things that we used to take for granted, like holding on to the bike for that long, hands go numb, things like that. Will I even be able to do this thing?
Wow.
And those
Sure.
kinds of fears are actually, I think, really healthy. And they're part of what, make the experience whole. And in the end, with, hopefully, a decent outcome, and a decent outcome will be me just reaching the finish line in Salida. We'll make it, a little more meaningful to me. It's all for me.
Well, riding 125 miles, where the majority of it takes place in the dark by oneself. I mean, that would be, I think, epic for anybody at any age. It's simple. Yeah, I think all of us would understand and appreciate your excitement and your apprehension. We wish you the best of luck, David. If people want to follow you and know what you're up to, how can they do that?
So I'm on Instagram, and I think it's Dave underscore Wiens, Wiens. It's not WEI, but WIENS. And I'm not a prolific poster on social media, but I put stuff up now and then. Seems like the stuff that I get the best reaction to is when I find an old photo and I scan it from the old days of mountain biking and I stick it up there. People tend to like that. Or if I somehow have a picture of me and John Tomac together, or me and Tinker, those two get hundreds of likes because of the popularity of those two individuals. But yeah, following is a little bit of a stretch, but I post now and then, and that's about the best way. Otherwise, follow our work at IMBA, at IMBA, and we're trying to do what we can for trails around the U.S. and beyond. But I love what you're doing. You're motivating all of these people to not give up and not, to somehow get it through their head that they're too old, is, to having the platform that you have and all of the different spectrum of older athletes that you're having on, and just the name of the podcast is, I think it's super important and really valuable. And I know it's impacting a lot of people. Then the people going, you know what, I can do that, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep doing that. So thank you for what you do.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless.